What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Flying with Garrett. Today I'm going to talk about the pros and the cons of commuting versus living in base, or lack thereof pros of commuting. So for anyone that doesn't know what commuting is like, you know how most people get in a car and commute to work, like they drive to work or they take a train or a bus or whatnot. Well, pilots who commute to work get on an airplane and fly to a different city. So what does that mean? I've had to experience both commuting and living in base, and there is a world's difference between the two. So I currently live in Charlotte, North Carolina, and when I first came onto the airline that I'm working for, I was based in Philadelphia. So every trip, which I would have about 4 trips a month, I would have to drive to the airport and get on an airplane and fly to Philadelphia, and then my day of work would start. But there's a lot more behind the scenes of what actually goes on of just driving to the airport and jumping on an airplane. So I'll give you an example. Let's say like I was previously based in Philly and I live in Charlotte right now, and let's say I was having to go to Philly to work tomorrow. So I'm looking at flights right now from Charlotte to Philadelphia. So let's just say like a common report time that I would have maybe was 12:45 p.m. Okay, so I need to be at work and reported for duty at 12:45 p.m. tomorrow. So tomorrow there is a 7:34 a.m. flight and a 9:30 a.m. flight that would get me there before my report time. So with commuting, you always need to have a backup flight. And by backup flight, I mean, let's say the first flight that is at 7:34 a.m. that gets in at 9:15 a.m. Let's say that flight cancels or that flight is full, meaning the way that flight benefits work is you list for a flight, and if there's an open seat, then you can you get that seat. So let's say that 7:34 flight is full and I missed the flight. Okay, well then there's a 9:30 flight that gets in at 11:09. So that's a legal backup flight. So I'm having to, let's say, thankfully I only live 15 minutes away from the airport, and this flight leaves at 7:34. So I need to be at the gate an hour prior. So I need to be at the gate at 6:34 a.m. So I need to leave my house about 30 to 35 minutes prior to departure, and that's prior to that hour report time. That's pretty pushing it too. So I'm now leaving at 6 a.m. Okay, so I'm having to get up at 4:45 maybe, just to not be rushed and get breakfast and stuff, and if I needed to finish packing. So I'm getting up at 4:45 a.m. and I'm leaving my house at 6 a.m. Keep in mind, my report time in Philadelphia isn't until 12:45 p.m. So that's pretty big already. Okay, so let's say I make my first flight. I make the 7:34 a.m. flight. I'm in Philadelphia at 9:15 a.m. My report time, which is an hour prior to duty, is at 12:45, and I'm there at 9:15. So now I have to sit around the airport for what, 9, 10, 11, 12, 3 hours. So that's kind of boring. You get tired because you already got up at 4:45 a.m. So you're wandering around and you do a 4-day trip, okay? Let's say I'm gone for 4 days. And this is where it can get really tricky. So I'm gonna look at flights from Philadelphia to Charlotte. So 4-day trip, I just got done. Day 4, a lot of flying. Let's check this out. So day 4, a lot of flying is done. Okay. The latest flight home is at 7:27 p.m. So hopefully my last day of flying, I don't have tons of flights that push me into the evening. So I'll just give you a couple examples. Let's say I get done at 8 p.m. Okay, there's no flight home that night. So what I'm gonna have to do is get a hotel in Philadelphia. So that can really start eating into your monthly salary. You're starting to get hotels every other trip, and that really sucks. And not only are you spending more money by commuting, you're also spending more time away from home. And by home, that could be your other priorities in life other than just work. That could be family. That could be maybe you have a side business. That could be a number of things that are already cutting into that commuting life. So that's one example. You're just not able to get home. But let's say you are scheduled to get done at 4 p.m. So there's a 5:11 flight and a 7:27 flight. So cool, you list for the 5:11 and it's full. You don't make it. Okay. So you roll over to the 7:27 flight and you get the last seat. Okay, cool. So now you land in Charlotte at 9:19 p.m. Well, you probably got up pretty early that day if you got done early afternoon. So you just did a whole day of flying, and then you had to get on an airplane and commute home. And then once you get to the airport in Charlotte, then you got to get in your car and drive home. So now you might have got up at 5 o'clock that morning, and now you're home at 10 p.m. or later. So right off the bat, you can see how much time you're already spending away from home. Versus, let's say, like how I am now, I'm based in Charlotte and I live in Charlotte. So let's say my report time is at 12:45 p.m. Well, I would leave my house at 12 p.m. versus leaving my house at 6 a.m. So that's 6 hours of being home alone just on day one of a trip. And if you factor in like maybe not making it home on the last day or being done at 4 p.m. on the last day and just driving that 15-20 minutes home, that's a huge difference. So if you don't make the flight and you spend the night, that's maybe 16 hours right there that on the back side of the trip that you weren't home, plus the 6 hours on the front side of the trip that you had to spend commuting. That's 22 hours. That's almost a whole day away from home just on one trip. And then you do that 4 times a month. So that's 4 extra days that you have to kind of factor in of being away from home. And if you only have maybe 13 days off that month, well, 4 of those days are spent commuting. So you're home 9 days for the month. Now, I'm not making this video to kind of like express like how crappy commuting is, but there's some commutes that are really easy and flights are always wide open and super easy. But a lot of people I know that are based in Charlotte that live maybe in Virginia, West Virginia, Tennessee, South Carolina, Georgia, they drive to Charlotte. That way they can get in their car and they'll be at the airport in 3 to 4 hours, and they don't have to deal with not making a flight home on the last day of a trip or not making their first flight and having to have a backup flight. So there's really no good thing about commuting unless you live in driving distance to the airport, which does absolutely save a lot of time versus having a backup flight or not making flights home. So my life personally became so much better once I got based where I live. Now, I'm not saying for anyone that is considering going to the airlines here in the United States, I'm not sure how it is overseas or in another country, but typically in the United States, you have to go to something called a regional carrier before you go to a kind of a major carrier. So we have like Delta, United, American, the bigger carriers, maybe even JetBlue, stuff like that. You have to go to Endeavor, SkyWest, PSA, Piedmont, Envoy, one of those smaller carriers, and fly with them for 5+ years before you go to one of those bigger carriers. So a lot of people move just for their bases of a regional, and then they get on 5 years later or maybe even sooner with a major carrier, and then they're moving again. So I would just, if you are planning on going to the airlines here in the United States, I would do your research. And that's also a big reason to pick an airline that you like is a lot of people just look at pay or aircraft that they fly, but you have to look at bases. Are those bases somewhere that you might want to live? Because honestly, commuting, it really does suck. It's not fun. And takes a lot of time away from family and friends. So if you can find a company that you want to work for, maybe you'll take just a little bit less money just to have a base where you want to live or that you already live. So that was a big reason why I went to the company that I went to, is because of the bases. I love living in Charlotte. I love being based in Charlotte. I really don't plan on living anywhere else. But if something else does happen, you know, I'm only 26 years old. Who knows? I could live in multiple places. I have no idea. So I hope this just opened y'all's eyes to some pros and cons, really cons of commuting, and maybe you'll think of bases that you want to live in versus, you know, just the other factors that go into picking an airline. So I know this was kind of a short video and it was all over the place, but if you guys enjoyed the video, smash that thumbs up button. I'm on Instagram. It's the same as my YouTube channel, Fly with Garrett. I'm on there every day. I upload tons of stories and I post every day. So check that out. And if you're new here, if you just found this video, please subscribe. It means a lot. And if you're enjoying these Fly with Garrett episodes, let me know in the comments below and give me, I don't know, maybe a topic for the next video. And I'll see you guys next time.